it's Armin. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello. I hope you stick around. Don't forget to hit subscribe down below as well as the notification bell so you can be told when I make a new video. Today I am doing the counterpart to my favorite books of 2020, which I will link up there and down below, which is my least favorite books of 2020. Surprise, I did 10 favorite books and I'm only doing 5 least favorite books because I had a very good reading year, and despite a lot of books being somewhat disappointing, which I made a separate video about, which I will link up there, I absolutely loved most of the books that I read this year, and I had very few hated books, but there were a few, so I put them on this list and I will get into them without further ado. The first book on this list is Girls Like Me, which I read for the very first readathon that I did this year. Girls Like Me is written in verse. It is a kind of middle grade, no, it is a middle grade, it's not kind of, it is a middle grade book about this girl who has very low self-esteem, and she has her two token best friends. One of them is the token gay guy and one of them is the token rebellious teen who is also dying of cancer. And I'm not saying this in that way to minimize either of those experiences because they are both very, very valid identities, but the way they were written in this book felt very shallow. It was all focused on this main character who had no depth whatsoever besides the fact that she hates herself. I don't even think that her struggles are written with depth. I think my main issue with this book was that it tried to tackle way too many different identities and struggles in a very limited format, and even in verse you can do that because I've read other books in verse that have done that, except it just was not done very sensibly and very well, and I just absolutely did not like the way anything was handled in this book. And even like the plot of this book was all focused on this main character who hates herself until she falls in love with this guy who only falls in love with her because he doesn't know what she looks like because they're talking on the computer, and they fall in love and then he finds out who she really is and he still loves her despite her flaws, and that's all it takes for her to love herself. And I just felt like it was all very toxic messaging for a lot of kids because even like the side characters, like I feel like they were put in there just to be token characters. Like, oh, you can relate to this character, but like you can't because they're so one-dimensional that there's nothing at all that you can relate to anybody about. I don't know, I just hated this book, and it was hard to finish, and I know that it's a middle grade and I should probably go easier on it, but I think it's even like toxic for middle graders. Like I don't like this book. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. The second book on this list is Made by Stephanie Land, which is a memoir about Stephanie Land's life as she is a single mother working as a maid to pay her way to college and also raise her child because, again, she is a single mother. And I very much feel for the struggles that Stephanie Land went through. I'm not rating this book as a rating of her life and her kind of actions. I'm rating it more of the book, the way the book was written, the way some of her actions are portrayed in this book. And again, just a disclaimer, I'm not saying this to say that Stephanie Land is a bad person or that I don't like her as a person. I don't know her as a person, despite reading this book. Obviously, I don't know her entire life story, and I'm just rating this as a book. Now, going into that, this book was a book of the month. I did not buy it from Book of the Month. I bought it like secondhand, but I thought I had high hopes because I thought Book of the Month seems like something that a lot of people like. They seem to rate good books all the time, so I'm gonna pick this. I trust that it will be good. It was a New York Times bestseller. Was it? I don't know, actually. It was a somewhat bestseller. It was pretty popular when it came out, and I had high hopes for it. Now that there are 2 books of the month on this list, I have lower hopes for Book of the Month, so we'll see. Basically, this story was very repetitive. It basically follows her very visually cleaning a lot of houses with very little other story in between, and she is basically complaining about things the entire time. A lot of this book is criticizing other people and judging other people about the things in their home or their perceived actions because, again, as a maid, she gets a lot of kind of background information about these families. She's in their homes while they're not home. She can look through all of their stuff, which she does at a couple of points. Look at this man's wife's ashes in the urn that he keeps in his house, and after the first time she realizes that it's ashes and she looks at it again, and I'm just like, that was a questionable thing to do. That was a boundary that was broken. These people trust that you won't be touching their things, and I get that sometimes like you have to cry in their bathtub as a coping mechanism, but like don't touch this man's wife's ashes, you know, like there's a certain boundary that was crossed. And I felt kind of iffy about a lot of things in this book, and I get that she went through a lot of struggles, and I get that this book is kind of talking about those struggles, but there's only so many times you can talk about cleaning a bathroom before you're like, okay, this is a memoir, like get on to the other stuff that you want to talk about, because there were like lessons that she learned in this book. At the end of the book, like there's some stuff that she talks about, and I'm like, okay, you could cut out like half this book and you would still get to that same message, and you wouldn't be missing anything basically. It's like, I don't need to know the background life stories that you have made up about every single one of these people and the judgments that you've made about every single one of these people, while you're also trying to argue about people making judgments about you. Like, she's talking about a lot about how people judge other people who are on welfare or who like are on government benefits, and she's like, don't judge me, like I'm doing what I can, you know, like I'm using this money despite not wanting to use this money because I have a child to raise. And that's all very valid. Like, there's a lot of stigma around about people who use government money. But while arguing against all of that judgment and stigma, she's also just criticizing other people, like middle class families, who she makes stories about and just like says very judgmental, hypocritical things about them. And I'm like, you don't know their life. You're telling people to not judge you for not knowing your life, and now you're judging them without knowing their lives. And I just found it I just didn't like it, and it was just a very boring read altogether. Like, as a book, I wouldn't recommend it at all, just because it was so boring to read. Despite being not that long, it was a struggle to get through. It was just so slow, and I just would not recommend this. I'm going to unhaul this. The only reason it's still on my shelf is because I kind of like how the spine looks next to my other 2 books of the month, so that's the only reason it's still here, but I'm probably gonna get rid of it at some point. The next book on this list is Mosquito Land, which I'm not gonna lie, when I first finished this book, I actually enjoyed it, and I gave it a higher rating than it currently has on my Goodreads. I'm just exposing myself here because this book is like a very stereotypical YA kind of contemporary book where you have a character who is borderline a like manic pixie dream girl who is just like very quirky and is weird and nobody likes her, and then she ends up having some random experience that doesn't happen in real life and has to meet cute with some guy who just happens to be really cute, and they fall in love because like they're the only 2 people on the planet or whatever. That's not the storyline, but basically they end up falling in love, and you know, stuff happens, and just it's like that. And they're fun to read, I'm not gonna lie, they're kind of fun to read when everything goes right like that, but at the same time, after I finished this book, I read a review on it, and I was like, oh damn, this is really problematic. There's a lot of like, just slightly problematic things in here, and also some major problematic things. There's some cultural appropriation. The main character often used like war paint or like tribal war paint, and it's described in a problematic way that I can't remember because it was so long ago that I read this book this year. But it's just like stuff like that, and then even the storyline is just like, again with the once you find a man, like your problems will be solved and it's just gonna be perfect, and she just randomly like meets these strangers and kind of trusts them blindly, and I feel like that's kind of a dangerous message to send because stranger danger. Like, despite one experience in this book, I would say there is some trigger warnings in this book, probably look them up if you plan on reading it, but the main one would be like sexual assault, and despite like some of these experiences and things that she sees in this book, she's still so like naive and blindly trusting, and she just sees this guy and she just gets in the car with him like, hey, we're going cross country, I need to find my mom, despite her saying she doesn't want to be found. Like, just, I don't know. A lot of this book was very overdramatic. It's like somebody tried to write a John Green novel but like overdid it. That's why I enjoyed it at first, because it felt like a John Green novel and I didn't have any more John Green books to read, so I read this and I liked it, but then I thought about it a little more and I was like, maybe not, maybe this isn't the book to like. So yeah, it was questionable. I probably wouldn't read it or recommend it again. The next book on this list is Little Fires Everywhere, which I didn't absolutely hate, but I had very high expectations for it, and it turned out to be one of the more boring books and disappointing books that I read this year. Little Fires Everywhere was really popular a few months ago when the show came out, and I think that maybe the show would honestly be better than the book in this case, because it just didn't go into the things I wanted it to go into. The pacing was quite slow. Basically, Little Fires Everywhere follows this family, these 2 families. I don't even know how to describe this book. Basically, the way it's portrayed is that there is a custody battle between a white, well-off family and a poor, illegal Asian immigrant and her immigrant, like, Asian daughter. because the baby is, I believe, Chinese, and this white family adopts her and the mom wants her back. And that is like what I went into this book kind of thinking I would get to read, which sounded very interesting and very relevant and very educational and just like, you know, something I'd want to read. And what I got instead was kind of a story about a completely different white family with like 5 kids or whatever, and how they interact with this other family who is like a mom and her daughter, and the mom is just this very quirky, mysterious character, and the daughter becomes friends with this rich white family, and they have problems and like stuff happens, and it's very slow and very much not what I thought I was signing up for. So I mean, go into it expecting what it actually is and not, you know, what you think it's gonna be, I guess, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Anyways, I was a little disappointed. I might still try the show because I've heard it's really good, so yeah, maybe that at some point, but the book itself was kind of disappointing. And the last book on this list, of course, is Mexican Gothic, which, oh my goodness, I had such high hopes for. And again, this is what I meant by 2 disappointing books of the month. Maybe I just won't buy books from them anymore. I don't know, but it was quite a disappointment. Basically, in this book, this main character goes to her cousin who is living in this mysterious mansion in the Mexican countryside, and she's married into this creepy European immigrant family, and the main character is trying to, you know, figure out what's going on because her cousin sent a very creepy letter about seeing things in the walls and things talking to her and very, you know, typical spooky ghost story stuff. And it starts out alright, and I thought like stuff was gonna start happening, and I even texted my friends while I was reading it because I was buddy reading it with Lisa, and I was like, okay, I'm on like page 100 or something, I think stuff is about to start happening, and like the stuff that happened was like not creepy at all. Like, it was supposed to be creepy, and the character is like, and then I knew to be terrified, but it was not scary at all. Like, if that happened, I would just be like, what is like fungus on the walls? Glowing lady? She's glittery? Like, I don't understand why this was supposed to be scary, and even the plot twist at the end was more weird than anything else. It was just so out there and not even built, I don't know, I would say it's not built up to, but like, I guess it kind of is built up to, but at the same time, it was just such a not satisfying ending, and just, there were so many things about this book that I was just yelling about because I hated this book. It was just so bad. I'm not ruling out the author. I'm not saying the author is a terrible writer or anything. I know a lot of people really love her writing style and absolutely loved this book, but it just wasn't for me. This was like a 1-star read for me, and I haven't had this fun hating on a book in a while, so I mean, I guess it was enjoyable in that sense, but I definitely wouldn't recommend this book. Like, this isn't one I would say, read this book for a good time. I would be like, read this book if you want to hate a book, and that's it, like, that's all. Anyways, those are my 5 least favorite books of 2020. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, if you also hated them. Join me if you loved them. I'm really sorry, but I didn't like these books. So no disclaimer. Anyways, that is all I've got. Please leave a like, comment, and also don't forget to subscribe so you can be told when I make a new video, because hopefully I will be posting new content very soon. Thank you guys for watching. Bye bye.